Welcome to Black Men Speak, a podcast that highlights ordinary black men doing extraordinary things. I am your host, Keith Dent, and today we're going to dive into a conversation that doesn't get nearly enough attention: the state of black men's mental health in America. The statistics are sobering. Black men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than black women, and over the past 2 decades, suicide rates among black boys have surged by 60%. When you factor in that approximately 62% of black males have experienced a traumatic event in their lifetime, and that homicide rates for black men are 10 times higher than for white men, the scale of the crisis becomes clear. Yet despite these challenges, only about 15% of black adults with mental health conditions receive treatment in a given year. Black men face unique barriers, from a shortage of black mental health professionals, who make up just 4% of psychologists nationwide, to historical mistrusts rooted in horrific events like the Tuskegee experiment. Add to this the daily weight of racial trauma, the stress of witnessing police violence through social media, intergenerational pain, and you begin to understand why rates of depression, anxiety, and PTSD are so high in the black community. But there are things that we can do holistically, and I'm speaking to a man who has done just that. He just also happens to be my friend and fellow Georgetown alum, Ron Martin, founder and CEO of Cope and Chill. Ron is an anxiety relief and mind-body balance coach who helps high-functioning, healing people break free from anxious overthinking and finally feel safe in their own skin. Through his Inner Calm Mastery program, he guides them to calm their nervous system and rebuild inner safety through body-first practices, so they can show up in relationships with openness, confidence, and genuine connection. On that note, let's start the show. Brother Ron, what's up, bro? How you doing?
All right, how are you? Been a
I'm
while.
doing good. It has been a while. It has been a while. How's where you are in your neck of the woods?
In terms of weather or
Weather, just in
yeah,
general,
man, the
you
last few
know.
days have been crazy. I'm looking out my window right now and it's just the trees are like going this way, like because of the wind. And I don't really want to go outside because it doesn't look inviting out there.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the Midwest, and it's been, Mr. I guess you want to call our president is just shaking up the area. I'm sure you're I'm sure you're noticing that.
I mean, I've seen videos of uh, the stormtroopers doing their thing right down the street from where I live, which is a little
Mm,
disconcerting. Um, and I feel for the people that are being directly impacted by this. It's not good.
that's crazy. That's crazy. So, Cope and Chill, which I actually love the title, by the way, of your
Thank you.
organization. So
Thank
you describe it as helping high functioning people who look calm on the outside but feel tense on the inside. Now that's rather interesting, because to me that, I guess, shows that there's probably a lot of people that are carrying or wearing masks.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
and so how do you recognize those people? And no, what inspired you to focus?
I think the first part of what you asked was how do I recognize these people, and then what inspired
Yes,
me to focus on it? Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
So what inspired me to focus, I'll take that part of the question first, is that I was that person. I was high functioning in terms of a job, I think in terms of a family. Um, and but and a lot of people thought I had people at work tell me I was just this calm person, but inside it was just turmoil, right?
Mm,
Anxiety and stress. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was a people pleaser. And when you're a people pleaser, or really, let's go more in depth and call it a codependent. When you're a codependent, you're on high alert for approval all the time. And when you
mm,
don't get the approval, when you're not able to please the person, your sense of worth, goes down. It creates anxiety within yourself. You tend to feel like you're not living up to what you should be. So you're always looking for validation externally. And it's an exhausting way to live. It's a painful way to live. So I think, over the years, I've learned ways to recover from that, to get beyond that. And that's really what I want to teach people, is how to do that for themselves. Because I know I'm not alone in terms of what I was experiencing. And I think, before the show started, you and I talked a little bit about people who work in industries or sectors, who or maybe healthcare professionals, and they have a lot of empathy to do what they
Mm,
do. They can have a lot of compassion, but that can be draining and overwhelming. And people like that who have a lot of empathy and compassion tend to internalize a lot of the things that they're experiencing. So the the trauma and the tension gets stored in their body. And
mm,
so, really, in terms of how I find people, is that I message, I try to go out and um, send messaging through my Instagram account, through posts and advertising and things like that, to people in those industries. Now, there are other people in other industries that, like lawyers and people work in IT, that also have high stress jobs. But it's really the people. And what I want to say about that is that what stress tells you is that is the difference between what you're expecting to happen and what actually is, right? So you've got this tension and you're trying to control the future a bit,
hmm hmm
and when that's not happening, or it's not happening as you want it to happen, that's when the stress can actually build up, and that happens a lot in people who have those professions, in particular. So.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. And so you had mentioned you saw it in your own life, or did you not see it in your life? Someone actually pointed it out to you. But I guess, did you, like, when you looked in the mirror, did you see that, I guess, within you, but then you tamped it down? I'd love to hear how when things started to kind of unravel and where you had to actually take action for yourself.
Yeah. So really, where I needed to make a change in my life was because my second marriage was falling apart, and it was going through a divorce. It was very painful, very stressful. I felt, I was depressed. I had a lot of anxiety. I uh, felt that abandoned, um, and my health was failing me. I just recovered from cancer a few years prior. I had autoimmune issues going on, and my kids at that time, were about 5 or 6 years old, and this was, and I really needed to ensure that I was around for them, that I was going to be in their lives. I wanted to see them grow up, and so, um, as I started thinking about how I was processing what was going on around me, I guess I reflected back to the first time I had been divorced. That was also a very painful process. And at that time, what I had done was I went to the doctor and I got some prescription drugs, and they actually made me feel worse. I actually saw a
Mm,
therapist too, which didn't help. So when I was going through the divorce the second time, I knew I couldn't go back there. I couldn't go back to those two things because they didn't work for me. And and I started really analyzing myself, and how I was processing what was going on. And what I realized is that the one constant in all that, in all of my experience, in terms of how I was processing emotions, and you knew me from when I was younger and
yeah.
probably a bit more emotional and a volatile kind of thing. What I realized is that the only constant was me. It didn't matter who the person was on the other side. I mean, I'd been married
Mm,
twice. I had other relationships. It was me and how I was reacting to it. So I was like, well, okay, so how do I figure out how to control my reactions? And I went on this search, to find a solution for that didn't involve therapy, that didn't involve drugs. So what ended up happening is I came across this mindfulness-based stress reduction course, and I took it. I signed up for it. Took it. It was an 8-week course, and it just changed my life. It
mm,
changed my life. And what I've discovered since then is that it just opened up a path in a world to so many other mindful, awareness based practices that are just so liberating that I just, it's like peeling back at onions. Like you go down the path and you you pursue one new practice or set of practices, and then you're like, oh, well, here's this other set over here. Let me learn about that, right? And so it just kept developing, over the years since then. So it was really the turning point was really I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't feel like I could talk to
Mm,
anybody about it. I didn't feel like there were any other solutions, and I realized that the problem was within me and nowhere else. So
mm,
had to do something about
right.
it.
So basically, do you think that's really, for the most part, our overall issue, I guess, in our community is that we have I guess we avoid looking at our own individual selves for support as opposed to, I guess, using either a scapegoat or just blaming it on someone else?
It takes a lot of courage to look at yourself with openness, full awareness, and kindness. We're not in our society. We're not really encouraged to do that. And also, what we're encouraged to do is you see it in sports. Black men play sports. You beat yourself
Mm,
up when you make a mistake. You chastise yourself when you don't achieve your goals. That kind of thing, right? And there's another way. There's another way, but you have to be open to it. And rather than and if you think about it too, when we chastise ourselves, when we beat ourselves up for not achieving what we want or making a mistake or what have you, whose voice is that? Where do we learn that? We learn that from our parents. That voice gets instilled in us when we're little, and we replay it over and over again as adults because it's natural. It's just what is our foundation comes from when we're little, and
right.
that gets expanded as we're an adult. But you can change that. The term that's out there that's being used is you can reparent yourself, and that's what
Oh,
a
I
lot
like
of
that.
this is reparenting yourself. And so you can give yourself the kindness and compassion that you didn't get when you were younger, when you faced
Mm,
those instances of not living up to whatever. And so, and I think the other thing is that when you look at yourself, it's hard. It's hard because if you have that
mhm,
critical voice, um, and you're looking at something that you don't like about yourself, it can be very painful. And that's why, and people avoid pain. People avoid pain. So that's why it's important to intentionally develop a lens of self compassion so that when you look at yourself, you're making it, yeah, there's a little pain there because maybe you don't like what you see, but you're being kind to yourself in terms of how you relate to it, and that makes all the difference in the world. And so our culture as black men, we that's just not part of it. It's really not
mm,
part of it.
right. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. And so you also mentioned that there has to be some healing in the body, or
Yeah,
in your mindfulness retreat,
yeah,
you learned how to do that. So kind of unpack that for me. What does that mean?
yeah. So I'm going to go down a path, and stop me, if I'm heading too deep into something,
Okay.
or if you have a question about what I'm saying. But I'm going to have to go to physiology first, human
Okay.
physiology. And the way that that works is when human beings experience trauma, we have a part of our brain that begins to rewire, especially if that trauma is prolonged. The part of our brain that tends to rewire is the amygdala, right? It's in the central part of our brain. It controls our fight or flight responses. Okay. That becomes stronger when we're experiencing trauma because we're always looking for danger, looking for threats, and being prepared to defend ourselves. Our brains, the primary purpose of our brains is for survival. And so when there's a sensed threat, the brain is triggered to actually communicate to the body through the nervous system to be prepared to handle that threat. Well, the ancient ways of dealing with threats was something that was physical. So, the
Mm,
tension in our shoulders means that your muscles are tense and ready to go. They're engaged and ready to fight. But what also comes along with that is the shallow breath. And you think about like when you're running or
Mm.
whatever, you have that shallow breath. That also happens when we're on constant high alert, even when we're sitting down. If our body still is in that emergency state, we're still having those symptoms. The other thing that happens is we get high blood sugar because your muscles need sugar to react quickly, to react strongly,
Oh,
whatever.
wow.
And cholesterol, because cholesterol is there as a secondary fuel source beyond beyond the sugar. Sugar is for that those primary bursts of energy. The if you were in ancient times as human beings, if we experienced a famine, right, which is a long-term sort of absence of food, right,
Hmm.
the cholesterol is released into your bloodstream to give your body that the longer term fuel to survive,
Okay. Right.
right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
But when we face these stressors in today's modern society, the body doesn't know the difference. So it's still releasing all these things into our bloodstream to prepare for the danger because our mind has already said there's danger here, right? So, but what happens is over a long period of time, that even after the trauma has stopped, we have something called an implicit memory, right? We still remember to be on high alert. We still don't quite yet feel safe. So the tense muscles, the rapid heartbeat, the short breath, all that stuff still remains,
Mm.
unless we learn how to process the emotions. But when we've not processed them as they're happening, they tend to become buried. They become implied. And really, the best way to handle that implied memory, which shows up as emotions, sensations, impulses, is through the body. So, because you can't really access that implied memory through, cognitive kinds of processing at that point, you really start from the bottom up. So you connect both mind and body together. So
Mm-hmm.
you can tell me if this doesn't make sense or if
No, it
I'm
makes sense.
you
Yeah.
have any clarifying, right? So really, the body first practices are an alternative way to get at um, something that's still stored in our body, that tension that's still there, that feeling of being unsafe and threatened that's still there after we experience trauma. Um, it is a derivation of, or they are derivations of mindfulness. Mindfulness, just to give a little history, because I know one of your questions was to talk about like, um, what are the misconceptions about mindfulness? We'll get to that in a second, but
Hmm.
just to
Yeah.
tell you real quick, mindfulness was introduced into the United States in a big way through a guy named John Kabat-Zinn, and he brought it to the University of Massachusetts hospital system. And what happened there was that he went around to the different wards in the hospital and he said, give me the people that you can't do anything with, that aren't responding to the medicines, that aren't responding to therapies, all that stuff. Give them to
Mm-hmm.
me and I'll work with them. And so when he put people through this program that he had developed, this mindfulness based stress reduction program, people reported feeling better after that, even after the medicines and other things. It didn't necessarily cure everything, it didn't necessarily solve everything, but they felt better. And
Right.
there's a reason for that that we can get into later. But that's so the point is that it has legitimacy in the hospital systems in this country. And when I had cancer, I actually was first introduced personally to mindfulness through a therapist, or not a therapist, but a practitioner at the hospital.
Okay. Because in essence, the treatments, I'm just trying to double down why that was introduced. The treatment that you had, or you had developed certain trauma and anxieties, and the mindfulness program helped reduce that. Is that why you were put into the program?
Well, so I went into the program because like I said, I had recovered from cancer just a few years prior to
Mm.
my second divorce, and I was experiencing this enormous stress going through this divorce, and I knew that stress and cancer were related. So I was
I
really
see.
afraid that the cancer was going to come back, and so I felt like
Gotcha.
I really had to do something about
I see.
it.
Yes, and then you did talk about misconceptions because I think we're in a just society where, look, if you have an issues, you take drugs
Right.
and
Right.
help reduce anything that you have. I mean, look, it's probably, if we wanted to talk about the top commercials on any in it, any program, sports or non, it's a drug related commercial, not
Because they
something
make a
like
lot of
this.
money. Yeah.
Yeah, because
And they can
so
afford the commercials. Yeah.
there's got to be so when we are introduced to a program like this, there are some just negative or misconceptions that we hear. So what are some of those misconceptions about a program like this?
Well, the first thing is that everything I do is based on mindfulness. And so a lot of people, when they hear the word mindfulness, they just think it's meditation. I got to go sit somewhere for like an hour and be completely still and quiet my thoughts. And that's not what it is at all. Mindfulness is something that can be practiced in doing what we're even doing right now. It simply means paying attention on purpose and without judgment. So it's being aware of what's actually happening within your body as you're experiencing it. Now, you first learn to do this by doing some meditations, but they don't have to be an hour long, or they can be 20 minutes, they can be 15 minutes. Some people do 3 minute practices. So it's all, it's all related. So there's that one thing about what mindfulness is. It's like this perception that it's this meditative thing I got to do, and it's really hard to work into my life and all of that. Um, that's one misconception. Another one is, um, well, it won't work for me. And I've talked to
Mm,
people who have tried out these apps, right? The meditation apps, and they'll do it like once or twice and be like, it doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, actually, physiologically speaking, it does work, but it works through rewiring your brain. Earlier, I talked about how your brain gets rewired through trauma.
mhm,
You're trying to rewire it back by making your body feel safe by doing these mindful based practices, and that takes time. You didn't fall
mhm,
into this traumatic state instantly. It happened over time, and so it takes time to work your body back out. It's something called neuroplasticity, which is much the same way that muscles work, except that we're talking about your
mhm,
brain, which is whatever you focus on, whatever you repeatedly do in your mind, is what your mind wires itself to do. And so if you wire it to be stressed out, it's going to be stressed out and always looking for stress. And if you wire it to be calm and peaceful, it's going to be looking to be calm and peaceful. But it takes time to do that.
okay. But would you say everybody has trauma?
I mean, I don't know if I can say that. I don't know, but what I do know is that um, I think if you look at the actual definition, I think there's a big T trauma and a little T trauma. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the distinctions between them.
Hmm.
I don't know if I can say that. Probably in Western society, many people have chronic stress, which is a close cousin to that, right?
Yeah, right.
And 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 so the chronic stress can also be helped by doing these practices.
Okay, okay. So if, I mean, for the people that are listening, that even are definitely piqued by interests, um, and are just feeling anxious, what are some just simple body practices that people can incorporate in their life? I would say before they go to the whole big program, but what are just some important things that folks can incorporate, like right now?
I actually have a mini course um, that's available if you DM me at excuse me, Cope and Chill on Instagram. I can send you a link, but I teach a lot of those practices in that mini course. It's only $27. But one of the practices is so we talked about like the storage of tension in the body, like perhaps in your
Mm,
shoulders or in your
yeah.
chest, whatever. There's a
Yeah,
short.
I got that. So I got
Oh,
that.
okay. All right. Well, then maybe you can do this with me. And it's a very simple practice. You can even do this with your eyes closed, your eyes open. Again, going back to the mindfulness thing and the misconception about it, a lot of the reason why you're started off in a more formal practice is so you can get used to how to practice. But once you develop a little bit of expertise with it, you can pretty much do mindfulness doing anything. You can do mindfulness brushing your teeth or whatever. But for this practice I'm going to take you through, um, you can do this with your eyes closed. It makes it easier, but you don't have to. And it's something called pendulation. And
Mm,
so what pendulation is um, it requires mindful awareness, right? Everything that I teach requires mindful awareness. So it requires turning your attention to the part of your body that is tense right now. So if you say it's in your shoulders, it's literally going down and seeing if you can notice the sensations in your shoulders where you feel the tension, what they feel like without judgment, without trying to make them go away. Just noticing maybe even the muscle fibers, which specific muscle fibers, the detail of it that are tense. And then once you've kind of, oriented your attention to that, turn your attention to finding a place in your body that feels completely calm, completely relaxed. It could be a forearm, it could be your calf muscle, it could be the top of your foot,
mm,
and spend some time there noticing how that feels, what it feels like, tuning into the sensations that are there. Then swing your attention back to the place that's tense. Spend time there, noticing what you're experiencing there. Then swing back to the area that's calm, noticing what that feels like, being with what you're experiencing there. Just trying to notice slowly, gently, calmly what that feels like, and then bring your attention back to the area that's tense. Trying to notice as much detail as you possibly can in that particular area. If it's your shoulders, seeing which parts, specific parts are tense, just being with it, noticing how it feels, and then swinging back. So really, it's about bringing the attention back and forth.
mm, hmm.
Now, did you notice anything, or did you notice a difference, or
Um, yeah,
and
I did.
yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that you to focus on so there was some, I guess the initial feeling was the fact that it felt like bunched up, the tightness
Hmm.
bunched up,
Yep.
and I guess slowly kind of unraveled.
Hmm. Yep.
It didn't complete unravel because I know this was very
Right.
short, but
Right.
it would start to unravel as I thought about the calmness of the other
Right.
part.
And not
Yeah.
just calmness. It's literally like turning your attention to like a spotlight where you're actually tuned in to like what's actually happening in that specific area of your body that's calm. Like seeing as much as you're tuning into the sensations in your shoulders, tune into the sensations or lack thereof in that
Mm,
calm area, right?
hmm.
And so what happens is, and so when we talk about retraining the mind, and I do this, it's you can do this for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. You can do it 5 times a day.
Hmm.
Your mind, your body will start to relax. So I've had this thing for years about like because of some early trauma I had in my first job out of business school where I worked like 80 hours a week and it was god awful experience. And I used to be at my computer at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to pound out a presentation or do an analysis and I would just be like, ugh, right? So I developed a trauma response in terms of sitting in front of a computer and doing work. Doing that pendulation has helped me relax by doing it consistently, by doing it repeatedly over time.
Mm,
Because
hmm.
then your mind, whereas your mind associated being in front of that computer as being someplace unsafe because of what I experienced earlier in my life, it now starts associated with being, it's okay, it's safe, it's okay.
Mm, okay.
And so you start to rewire the brain that way. But again, it's like whatever you're experiencing, wherever that stuff is locked in your body, that happened over time. And so doing this once, and that'd be like one of my biggest takeaways from this, doing it once may give you some relief, but it's not going to keep it from coming back again. You've got to
Right,
make
right.
it a regular practice. Just like if you were training for sports or learning to play a musical instrument, you've got to do it repeatedly to rewire that brain to go the other way.
Okay. Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Great stuff. So tell us about the inner calm mastery. What makes the experience different, and who is it really designed for?
Yeah, so it's designed for people who um, are anxious overthinkers that struggle with anxiety, that are looking to calm their nervous system and quiet the racing thoughts. I've talked to many people like they can't go to sleep at night. They get on their phones and they're surfing and stuff, and then they don't fall asleep till like 2 o'clock in the morning. Then they got to get up at 6, right? And and so they're always in this state of high alert. And so what I do and what makes it different from, let's say, the the apps or what have you, is that you're going to get my presence, right, as part of this experience on a weekly basis. We have an online community so we can support each other. And we're going to be doing short practices, somewhat similar to what I just took you through with the pendulation. And then we're going to be there. I'm going to help support you to build a program where you can do that consistently and build it into your life. So when you say, I've got this enormously busy life, some of these practices you can do while sitting in your car waiting for something. Or there's a practice called 5 4 3 2 1 that you can do anywhere. You could do it sitting here at your desk, right? The point is there are ways to rewire your nervous system at any point. So we're going to be working through those. So short things you can integrate into your life. You have the personal connection to me. You have the online community, and we're building in that accountability and supports, kind of like working with a trainer, so that people feel like there's still that encouragement, that motivation to continue on with this, because that's where you're going to see the biggest changes and differences is if
Mhm.
you consistently practice. So that's
Okay,
that's where we're going about it.
great, great. So, so earlier you had mentioned, which I think it happens a lot in our communities, is being, people pleaser and seeking validation in
Hmm.
others, which is, I mean, it's which is oddly enough what athletics is all about, right? Where you get seeking validation in the roar of the crowds and things of that nature. But
Yes and
uh,
no.
yeah,
The supreme athletes, they're highly confident. They validate themselves all the time. If you hear guys like Charles Barkley or Michael Jordan, whatever, they don't ever say there's a weakness in their game.
right,
They're saying, I know I'm going to beat that person, right? They're supremely confident, but most people aren't. But anyway,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. But how did that shift for you, where the validation was within yourself?
I think again, it's funny because I was aware of some of the people pleasing aspects of my personality for a while, and ironically, where it would most painfully show up is in the type of relationships I would attract and the type of women I would attract.
Mm,
And
mhm.
and um and
Even back in school, I just go back.
that was one of the biggest points of awareness, is that yes, it had been going, and now I know why. Yes, all the way back from there,
Okay.
even before then, and I know why now. But it wasn't really. I really had a point where I had to deal with, well, why does this keep happening? What is it about me that's it keeps putting myself in this position? So I was trying to take the accountability for it, and so I did a lot of
Mm,
research, did a lot of digging around, and one of the biggest struggles that people pleasers have is not being able to set boundaries, not being able to stick up for yourself. And again, I know why that is now. I wasn't as aware of it when I was back in college.
mhm,
Wasn't even aware of it at all, really. But I'm aware of it now. And one of the things so then it became, okay, so what do you have to do to start learning how to set boundaries for yourself, to stop the people pleasing? And so I did a lot of research and I worked out a method. And again, using mindful awareness, one of the biggest hurdles people pleasers have is the feeling of guilt of disappointing someone. Okay. So they'd
mm,
rather avoid the guilt than to disappoint someone who's hurting them. Okay.
mm,
And,
mhm.
and when I had internalized that, I was like, "Ooh, that's just
Wow,
crazy." What
that's
you're
deep.
basically
Yeah.
saying, yeah, so you're loving someone else more than you love yourself. And what I started to realize was that the real culprit was to learn how to process that emotion. So I researched some methods to be able
Mhm,
to do that. Acceptance and commitment therapy is it's a mindfulness-based approach to processing emotions.
Mm,
Um,
mhm,
and I learned how to do that skill, and that made such a huge difference because then I was able to say no without worrying that I was disappointing someone. And once I started practicing it, it was a little nerve-wracking at first. Once I started practicing it and I saw the reactions, it was like, oh, okay, I can do this. It's okay. I'm still alive. I'm still good, you know. And
right.
then I learned, but innately, as part of that, I had to validate myself for trusting myself in that moment by saying, you know what, that worked. You're okay. You can do this, right? That's the invalidation that's built into trying this life-changing behavior. But you had to start small. I had to start small, but you build up the confidence to be able to expand that over time. And then as you're doing it, you keep validating yourself for taking those actions. But then you also realize that you're in that process through that transformation, you're learning to trust yourself. You're
Mm,
learning to trust and validate your needs as being as important as whatever else this other person is asking of you. Right. So it becomes a bit of a process.
gotcha, gotcha. And because of that acceptance of yourself and some of the things
Mhm.
that you did, has it changed how your, I guess, interpersonal relationships?
Yes, yes, it has. And you know what's funny about it is and this is how much of a people pleaser I used to be because now that I've started setting these boundaries, people are like they're like really kind of surprised by my reactions. I've dated women and they, there's these I'll call them games that they'll play, and then when I don't like chase, they're like, well, how come you're not chasing? I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's like, if you're interested in interacting with me, then interact with me. Otherwise, I got other things to do. You know what I mean? It's like I
Okay.
don't, right? So you learn that and so what you have to then do is be okay with some of those responses. It's never really somebody they may try to some people on the extreme end may try to get a rise or reaction out of you, but if you don't bite,
Mm,
they'll go away. And the other thing is that if they wonder what happened to you, let them wonder. You're not responsible for their feelings. That's another learning I've learned from this. I
mm,
didn't do anything to intentionally try to hurt you, but if you're angry at me, that is not my responsibility. Your anger is simply the difference between what your expectations are and what is actually happening. And if you're expecting me to behave a certain way because you want me to and I didn't, that's not my problem.
interesting. Interesting.
So there's a little bit of an insight, an awareness to insight there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, actually. I mean, absolutely. And because I know the last time you were on, your children were, of course, younger. Now they're much older. So have you
They're in high school.
seen, yeah, is that wild? That's just
Yeah.
it's crazy,
Not to me.
thoughts. But yeah, I know you're like glad.
Your father,
He's like,
well, not really even that. It's just that when as a father of triplets, and people say it goes by fast, it doesn't go by fast. It doesn't. So,
mm, mm. But
and it's okay.
I mean, in watching them grow up, have you noticed some of the traits that you had when you were younger, and have you tried to instill some of those practices that you've learned in them? And if
Oh
so,
God,
how has that worked?
yeah. Oh God, that's a difficult question, Keith, because I see some of the ways that they approach things
Hmm.
that I used to take similar approaches when I was their age, whether it
Okay.
be the people pleasing, whether it be just some of those kinds of things, and or not setting boundaries, things like that.
Hmm.
And when I try to introduce some of the things, it's like they're not having it. It's like it's like your
Yeah.
dad or whatever. It's like I mean, even one of my daughters, I was trying to get her because she had a little bit of anxiety going on. I think it's better now, but trying to introduce her to some of the mindfulness practices, and she's like, "Yeah, meditation doesn't work for me." I'm like,
Oh, wow.
"Okay,
Wow. Yeah.
okay, we'll revisit this conversation later." But it's some of it is just attitudinal, as it is with any teenager, right? It's like
Hmm.
your dad, it's like I mean, it's funny because just on other things like not related to mental health, it's like I literally am sitting up there telling, it's like, I have some experience that matters. I have 2 degrees from some of the best universities in the country. It's like I know things. You may think I'm an idiot, but I do know things.
And they were like, no, you don't.
Like,
I
right,
don't I don't
exactly.
care I don't care how many degrees you have. You could be a doctor for all I care.
Exactly. Yeah.
But but on the flip side, do you parent differently? Because you said a lot of this
Yes,
comes,
I
yeah.
noticed that especially after my divorce, I was pretty angry. I was a pretty angry person, and they knew it, and they could sense it, and
Mm,
have remarked over time that I'm a much calmer person. That I approach them in a calmer way. Um, you know, as time has gone on. So I think here's one of the biggest things that I've learned: when you are not compassionate with yourself, you tend to be if you have anger, right, or if you have whatever, or fear, you're going to live out those emotions on the people around you unless you have
mm,
some other kind of self-awareness. However, the flip side is also true. If you have compassion for your emotions, for yourself, for and what I'm talking about here, Keith, is we're not talking about making emotions go away. Emotions are innate to who we are as human beings. They are part of who we are. It's how we keep them from overtaking and running our lives is what I'm
mm.
talking about here.
Gotcha.
And so when in working um in being with my kids, when I'm really focusing on practicing compassion to myself, that's when I'm most easy and compassionate with them because you're reflecting what's inside outward.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Um, so basically really dealing with ourselves first before we want to come down on them.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you
Yeah, because I
extend
mean,
the kindness, you extend the kindness given to yourself to others. That's a general rule. If other people extend kindness to you, you're going to be kind to them. But if you extend kindness to yourself, you will also extend kindness to others.
right, because I do find if I could just quickly, yeah, think about some of the anger that I might have had towards my kids is because more angry that whatever I tried to instill wasn't working.
Well, there's, but the other thing we have to, and say, and people have told me this too, other parents, they're like the kids are listening. They may not, their behavior may not change when you want it to change. Again, remember, anger is about the difference between expectation and reality. They may not exhibit that behavior right when you want them to, but they're listening. And so it may come back around later, right?
Mhm.
You may see them develop that later.
Right.
Um, and just know that you're planting seeds is probably the best way to look at it because seeds take a while to grow. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
not all of them are going to sprout right away.
Yep. Great stuff. Yep. So what advice would you give? So if I'm someone that, I've heard what you said, try to practice or at least take the steps, but I'm still feeling anxious and not, especially in my body, I'm still feeling anxious. What would you recommend I do?
Well, first of all, I think it goes back to like what was it, like the first question you asked me is like, or maybe it was in the first 3 questions you asked me. It's like, well, what is going to be necessary for you to change? When does the pain of what you're experiencing today come to the point where you've got to do something about it? And that what you've tried before, whether it be therapy, drugs, or whatever, didn't work, right?
Mm,
And then when you're ready to take that step, then it's about finding that exposure to changing your relationship to your body,
mm,
changing your relationship to your nervous system. And that's what is fundamental to start shifting. It's these. So the name of my site is Cope and Chill.
mm,
That is a different way of coping when we turn towards our experiences and emotions as opposed to avoiding them and suppressing them and turning towards them with kindness, which is really the essence of mindfulness and mindful
mm,
self-compassion. That is what will change you forever. And this is why I believe so strongly is because these are lifelong skills that you can use for the rest of your life,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
It literally can change your life if you're up to the practice.
Great. Well, this has been truly enlightening, to say the least. Because it just you don't we a lot of times don't feel we can take ownership of our own bodies, take control, and do the inner work to get these things done. You're just like, well, we're just a fast-paced society. You got an illness, you can fix it by getting medicine or going here, going there. But I think the much inner work that you can do is really helpful, not only for your physical state but mental. And you've really given us a great way to do it. So
we talked about, I just want to add, we talked about reparenting, right, as a term to think about. And if you search for it, you'll find people talking about reparenting. Before that, I even learned what that term was. Years ago, I had a friend, and she pointed out to me, because she was struggling with some of the ways I was behaving relative to her, and she pointed out to me, she said, you may want to blame your upbringing for how you are, but she said, after the age of 21, you are responsible for you. Your parents aren't responsible for you anymore. So what are you going to do about that? And that really stuck with me, and it really opened my eyes. And that's the same way as saying that when we're adults, we have an opportunity to reparent. Anyway.
Shoot, I thought it was 18, so I got to give my son 3 more years. 3 more years.
Well, it could be, whenever they're ready to listen to it.
Yeah, I get it. I guess. So, how can someone find your platform or your program so they can start to take advantage of the opportunities to really heal and reparent themselves?
So the best way to reach me, or the best way to find me, is on Instagram at Cope and Chill. So COPEANDCHILL. It's all one word, Cope and Chill. And then from there, hey, DM me, say hello. I'm a friendly guy. At least I like to think so.
Yeah, no more anger.
Yeah. Right. And this, if there's some way I can be of help, I'd love to, work with you. If not, I'm happy to share, point you in other directions that I think might be useful. So just let me know. I just want to also be clear. What I teach is not therapy. It's not therapy. It's not a substitute for therapy. You could still go to a therapist and do what we're teaching here. What we're giving you is an alternative approach that is a skill set. It is a coping. If you've never learned how to process your emotions or to cope with what's happening in your life, these are skills that you can learn to process that.
Right, because you're not going to reach your therapist at 2 a.m. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And as I said before, when I was going through my divorce, I didn't have anybody to talk to, or didn't feel like I did. I had to learn how to work with myself.
Absolutely. Well, Brother Ron, thank you for being on the show once again.
Thanks for having me.
These are some great gems, and I look forward to utilizing some of these practices myself, especially that pendulation. Love it.
Yeah, let me know if you need any more tips on that. Happy to share.
All right, definitely.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yep. This is Keith Dent from the Black Men Speak podcast. Thank you for tuning in today, and we look forward to even more gems that are going to be coming up for the end of the year. Thank you. Black Men Speak was written, produced, and edited by me, Keith Dent. You can find previous episodes wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If this is your first time discovering the show, or you're a Black Men Speak podcast fan, make sure you like and subscribe. We always like to end the show with a quote, and this one comes from Courtney B. Vance. I think we all need to find a good person to chit-chat with, and just like we tune up our cars, we need to tune up ourselves. This is Keith Dent from the Black Men Speak podcast. Peace.